Hello, listeners. Welcome to another edition of the Football History Podcast. My name is Nick Hart, and I'm going to big welcome to the show today to Phil Annets. Welcome to the show, Phil.
Hi, Nick. Hi, great to be here.
And Phil, listeners, is the author of a wonderful cornucopia. I'm borrowing some of the blurb on this. The cornucopia and compendium of FA Cup facts. It is the 150th anniversary of, for me, and I think most football fans, Phil, the most wonderful football competition that there is. Certainly the grandest, and it still carries its name still has status. The FA Cup. This is an immense work that you've put together here. The FA Cup 150. How do you compile such a book? I mean, you must have a system of filing system like New Scotland Yard with card indexes. And how do you do it, mate?
Yeah, I have a very good system that I know where everything is, but I don't think anyone else would be able to find their way around it. And it's basically double, triple, quadruple checking everything that I do in so many different places. Probably not the most efficient mechanic, but I find things quite easily. So to produce a book like FA Cup 150 always requires just checking and double checking. And it's an immense database or databases with all the results, and I've just used my statistical skills, I guess, to bring together information that helps tell a story about a competition.
I think Sherlock Holmes had a similar system. He knew where everything was in his office at 221B Baker Street, didn't he? And it worked for him, and it clearly works for yourself. Just to start us off, the reason that I'm speaking to Phil is that he does have a book out, and it is available. You've actually got your own website here for factfile.co.uk, and there is a deal on listeners at the moment, £15 for the book, but free postage during January. That's got to be worth a go. The book looks really, really fascinating. If you're into the kind of, I suppose I'm comparing it with the likes of the Rothmans Football Yearbook, Phil. I mean, what inspired you to begin to do this? To compile this wonderful work.
Well, I've always loved the statistical side of football as much as I've loved football itself.
Right. Okay.
I mean, some would call me a nerd, who knows. But it used to be a derogatory term. I think it's now a term of respect for people.
I agree.
Who are willing to put the time in to be dedicated to something they're passionate about.
Absolutely.
The FA Cup was a fantastic competition growing up. I was from growing up in the mid-70s, and it was the only game, the Cup Final, the only game you could see on the TV live, and they made a big show of it, spending all day building it up.
Yeah, and, absolutely.
I'm afraid to say my team is Leeds United, so at the time, they were quite big at a club in the Cup in particular as well. And so the two things combined just meant that I fell in love with the competition and have retained affection for it ever since. The nerdy side of me just collated facts and stats as you do.
Yeah.
And I think it's around about 2000 or so, a book came out called The Complete FA Cup Results. And that showed me all the results that existed in the qualifying rounds as well as the proper rounds, as they're called. And it was a whole load of information I never had. And as I was a bit of a completer finisher, I needed to make sure I had everything. I then started collating that as well into a format that I could use to what eventually became FA Cup Factfile, which is the Twitter handle I use to share my information.
Yeah, which I am a follower of, and I recommend anyone listening to the show follows it. It's a great source of the wonderful information that just makes football, what it is. It's like the salt and pepper on top of your food. It's wonderful stuff. I mean, we're doing this interview, listeners. This is an audio podcast, and I will never use the video for this. But I'm seeing Phil is the same age as me. I also grew up in the 70s, and I was just making some notes, Phil, before we started speaking. It was it is the landmark of the year, really. As a kid, it was the whole day devoted to all sorts of things. It's a knockout. I remember they had like the two team supporters quizzes and the build up. It was an immense thing, wasn't it? The FA Cup final day. It's lost some of the gloss in that way. I suppose the advent of live football, Premier League live football, did for it largely.
Yeah, Premier League football being on every week, and then the Champions League being the competition where the money's at,
Yeah.
sort of took the shine off it from those who are concerned about the money side of the game. But I think if you talk to, and I do too, if you talk to fans of the game, and I'm sure if you talk to players of the game, and I've done that as well, that the love for the FA Cup is still high. You know,
Yeah, I agree.
Who wants to be able to tell their grandson in future years that I won the FA Cup versus I managed to make fourth place one year, which was quite nice. You know, if you can show them a medal, or even if you're from a lower level club and you've scored a goal in a competition, what a fascinating thing to be able to tell your kids that you've scored in the same competition as your heroes. And,
Absolutely,
it's a fantastic
no,
competition. It brings everyone together from all levels of the football world.
We live in strange times. It always intrigues me and fascinates me to some extent when you get these online debates over the relative value and worth of different clubs now. I mean, obviously, we're living in the kind of elite age of Premier and European champion football. But who really cares when you're a child what the accounts say at the end of the year? Who's got more money and who's top of the Deloitte accountants league? It's all about the glory, or it should be. But we're in different times now, aren't we? I mean, I think that's the beauty of the cup. I mean, it's such a democratic competition. I mean, I'm doing a little bit of research for this conversation. I hadn't realised the extent, the depth of the level. It goes down to level 10, I believe. All clubs basically down to level 10
Well, it's
in English
level
football.
9 from now.
Level 9.
The FA have restructured the pyramid and they've sort of promoted a few teams up to get a set number of teams across all the levels. And so now they're saying it's level 9 is your entry. So as long as you're at level 9 and you meet their criteria for ground grading, then you will be included in the FA Cup. And I think the FA have just tried to standardise it as much as they can. I think
over 600 clubs. Yeah,
600, 700, obviously more than 700 clubs. I do think it's a good idea to try and get the standardisation, but I do also know that there are stacks and stacks of clubs who wish they could be involved each season that meet the ground grading but don't actually have the status in terms of league position that would still love to be part of the competition. And for me, it would be no skin off the nose of the FA to allow them to take part. I really don't understand why they don't just say, "Come on in, you know, you've got the ground grading, just take part and be involved," because the clubs at that level love the competition. I think more so maybe than those involved with clubs that higher up, even though their chances of winning it are zero.
Negligible, yeah, to zero. Yeah. I mean, it struck me that the kind of qualifying rounds. I mean, I think as a fan, I mean, every fan of every club relates their glory days. Often are cup ties, aren't they? I mean, if you can make a final, that's wonderful. But invariably, there are cup runs, there are moments of glory, and every club has those moments as part of their tapestry. I do. I'm sure you do. Every listener probably does to some level. But what struck me was the qualifying rounds are almost like it's like a parallel competition going on beneath the surface, like an iceberg. And all of those clubs would have their Giantkillings, their days of bad luck, all the things that come with it.
Yeah, they remember the big days when they beat local rivals, or if they were able to knock out a perceived giant, or they had a famous comeback win when they all lost. It's all relative, but it's all remembered in with fondness, more so maybe than any league campaigns or even league championships. I think the FA Cup does evoke a lot of passion and memories, and I think that people love to be involved in it, and it's the easiest thing to remember. Where were you on that day when we knocked out so and so from 3 levels above? And it's brilliant for me as a statistician for the FA Cup is that every year that means there's going to be hundreds and hundreds of stories as clubs across the pyramid create records for themselves that I can then communicate and share with others about how well they've done.
That's fantastic. I mean, I was trying to write some questions out, and I was falling into the trap of just writing the easy questions. One of which, has the club is the club tarnished, Phil? Has it lost its gloss? But then you've got Kidderminster Harriers beating Reading in this, not just a few weeks ago. Newcastle getting beaten at home, now the richest club in football allegedly. getting beat by Cambridge at home. So, and Boreham Wood, of course, beating Wimbledon. So,
Yeah.
I answered my own questions. I kind of gave up trying to write easy questions for you because I found myself answering them myself. I mean, it's wonderful to see that. I mean, obviously this year you've got a slight rule change and they've done away with replays, haven't they? I think the FA have plans for that to just be a temporary thing. Do you like replays? I'm kind of drawn to the one-off do or die idea of it. I think there's something in the spirit of it.
As a statistician who's got to monitor lots of games, a one-off game is a brilliant thing, but you know,
self-interest.
But for me, replays are an integral part of the FA Cup. Historically, obviously, they were used to try to get a winner after the first drawn game, but they do play a role in that they provide an opportunity for you to get an advantage over the disadvantage of being drawn away from home. So in the FA Cup, at home or away, it's random. So, it's a disadvantage to be drawn away. So the replays are there to enable you to have a chance to get them back to your place. Modern times, a lot of people focus on the money side of it for smaller clubs. And so for smaller clubs, it's about trying to get the money from a trip to a larger team. And that may well be true. And I'm sure it's beneficial for clubs when it happens. But I think more so for those clubs, it's about the prestige of holding a giant to a draw and then
absolutely,
or even better still, having drawn at their ground and bringing them back home. The biggest, most common FA Cup upset that is shared whenever the FA Cup comes around is a Hereford versus Newcastle United victory in 1972, and that was a consequence of a replay Hereford having held Newcastle at St James's Park, took them back to their own ground, and that's what clubs at that level want. They want to be able to play the big teams at their ground, but use the replay to get back to their own place, or if they're at home, to get for that big money spinning win that gets them to the bigger ground. Either way, it gives them an opportunity to be the focus, and therefore the TV will be interested in following them, and that will bring some income in itself. As we saw in the third round this year, the non-league teams got missed out in terms of live TV money. But if any one of those had drawn their game, if they'd been allowed to, and had a replay, they would have been from a smaller set of teams, a small set of games, so they would have had more chance to get TV money from a replay. So I also think, and this is fairly controversial, but it's my view, is that I say quite clearly, getting rid of replays in the FA Cup will not free up fixture congestion that is perceived to be the reason why they've been taken away.
It's hung on that, isn't it? It's hung on that.
I have a line that says it's like taking the tonic out of your G&T if you want to give it an alcoholic. It isn't going to happen, and it's farcical. We had one replay in the second round this year, one replay out of 20 games. I think we would have only had about 3 or 4 replays in the third round. So how many teams are really affected? It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, fixture congestion is a perennial complaint of the elite clubs. But there we are. It's a different podcast, I suppose, isn't it? We'll leave that there. You're pro replays. I know what you mean. I get that, and I kind of agree with it. I suppose also if Giantkillings are the lifeblood of the competition, which is the FA Cup in a nutshell, that potential that you never know who's going to play well on the day, who's going to play badly. I suppose a one-off gives more chance of Giantkilling. So whichever, you can go around the circle.
I guess. I mean, it's great to win on penalties. I know it is, because I've been involved with teams that have done that. But is that the same as winning in 90 minutes?
It all depends. That's one of my team's great cup ties. We played last time we played Chelsea. Millwall beat them on penalties. So if it works for you, they're brilliant. If you get beat by them, which we did a couple of years ago against Brighton, then they're heartbreaking. So there we are. Different podcast, as I say. Strange thing with the FA Cup, Phil, and I don't know if you agree with this. I think it's loved in a way that the League Cup has never been. The League Cup has always been this kind of like the runt of the litter almost, and you don't remember your League Cup ties in the way you remember your FA Cup ties. It's got that kind of what is the word? it runs deeper, doesn't it? It has a status and a glamour that the League Cup has never generated.
I think, so over time, I know it's hard to relate to people from the early days in football, but it was the first football competition.
Yeah.
And for years and years, it was the one to win. And I suppose that has ingrained itself in people in the way that the League Cup hasn't. Because even when the League Cup was launched in the 60s, it wasn't brought into by all the clubs. It took about 2 or 3 seasons and an agreement there'd be a Wembley final and European places to get the top clubs to be involved. So it's got a history of disinterest right from the start.
It was a bad start, wasn't it?
It's not a good start.
Do you compile stats on the League Cup just out of interest, or is it not one that you? Do you compile stats on the League Cup, or is it not?
I have got them, but it's so widely covered by so many different people. It isn't any real worth in make a point of difference. The FA Cup, and I do an FA Vars one as well. They're competitions that aren't so well covered at the same depth. I mean, once you get beyond the third round, yes, there are many statisticians out there who will talk about the FA Cup, but to cover the whole competition from start to finish, I think I'm the only one who's doing that.
That's a huge task you're taking on there. I mean, you mentioned the start of the competition back in 1871-72. And I suppose, as you say, I mean, until the formation of the Football League, which was 1888, it was the only football competition really worth the name, wasn't it? So it had that kind of head start. I'm always fascinated by the public school origins of the competition. That's become such a icon of what you might call the working class game, but it had its origins in the fields of Harrow and places like that, didn't it? The Wanderers were a bunch of public schoolboys, basically.
Well, all the clubs around there were either of public schoolboys or from the forces, the armed forces, or had that ethos of the amateur game.
Yeah.
There are other people who are much more expert on the foundations of the FA Cup in terms of all the people who were involved in it. But basically, it was the fledgling FA who had only been going for 8-9 years. Charles W. Alcock had been involved in a competition at Harrow School that we thought could be used as a template for getting competitive games for FA member clubs. And that was where it was launched. I think it was Sportsman's Office in London, and I think 18 clubs originally said they wanted to take part, but 3 decided they didn't want to by the time the draw got around, and then several withdrew even after the draw. So we got off to a very slow. But they're all amateur clubs, and it was an amateur game for a long time, and there was a big battle, as you may well know, between the amateur and the professional game, even before the Football League started. And quite a few of the clubs sort of pretended that they weren't paying players when they were, and the FA found out and kicked them out of the competition. But it was a battle that was always going to be won by the professional side of the game. And where we are now.
Absolutely. And I mean, I always enjoy, I suppose it's a well-known fact that Queen's Park from Glasgow, they only played 1 game in that inaugural competition. Was it they went straight to the semi-finals and then couldn't afford the welfare to come back again. That was their was their cup run, wasn't it? Wonderful.
Yeah, and then they entered every year for a few years and then didn't even play a game for many years. And then when they finally did, they got all the way to the final on a couple of occasions. They were a very dominant force in Scotland. I think they were unbeaten in Scotland for many, many years, and won all the early FA Cup games in Scotland as well, finals in Scotland. So, it is nice. They played in 2 finals against Blackburn in consecutive seasons, Blackburn Rovers. Which is a unique aspect of the competition where it's the only time 2 clubs have faced each other in consecutive finals. So I think it would be interesting if that ever happens again.
I mean, a landmark, I suppose, for the FA Cup competition. I don't know if you'd agree with this, but the attendance of George V in 1914 at the Cup final, the first time that a member of the royal family had attended, kind of gave it a stamp of official endorsement. Poignantly, just ahead of the First World War, where that they may well have called upon the very fans that they were suddenly endorsing. But anyway, that's me being cynical. I suppose that was that. Would you say that was the kind of start of the modern competition in terms of national consciousness, or would it predate that for you, Phil?
Well, if you think about the final of 1901, where there was 120,000 people turned up.
Yeah, yeah.
127,000, I think. That was when Tottenham Hotspur were in the final against Sheffield United as a non-league team. So it was obvious, even before the royal family patronage, that it was the game of the masses, and that the cup final was the big game that everybody wanted to see.
Yeah,
it helped that Spurs were a Southern League team as well, because
yeah,
the competition had been dominated by the North in the previous season. So it was good to see that rise of the football strength in the Southern League, epitomised by both Spurs and Southampton and Millwall. In fact, was
the big cup team. Yeah, yeah.
I think Millwall Southampton in 1900 was a semi-final of two non-league teams. So you can see how big the game was in the south. And so, yeah, I think it already started, and maybe it could be the other way around, that the royal family saw that it was something for them to be involved with to maintain their popularity. But that's quite an interesting game, that Burnley versus Liverpool. It was the last time the final was played at the Crystal Palace ground.
Right.
It's also, for a historian like me, the intriguing fact about that game. But everyone thinks it's the first one George V was at, but for me, it was the last time we had an FA Cup final that involved two teams that had never been in a final before. So that for me is an amazing stat about that game.
Yeah.
So every final since then, at least one of the clubs has been in the final in previous times.
Right. Okay. I didn't know that. You bowled me out with that. You bowled me out with that one. The Crystal Palace ground is, I mean, obviously the first finals they played at various venues. I think the Oval Cricket Ground was the first.
Oval was the main one, yeah. It was, And then, besides the second FA Cup competition, the Wanderers were not only were they exempt until the final, because it was meant to be a Challenge Cup, so the winners.
So you defended your title, yeah. I get it. Yeah.
They chose the venue as well,
right,
as well as being exempt. So you have some strange grounds, but. It was the Oval primarily, then Crystal Palace, then Stamford Bridge had a run while they were building Wembley, and then obviously Wembley and Millennium Stadium have been those. Yeah.
I mean, the photo, I've seen photos of the old Crystal Palace ground, which I think was primarily a cricket ground, I suppose, like the Oval, and the crowd was immense, but it looked like such a not an easy venue from the spectating point of view. The guys standing on posts and all sorts of things to get a view of the game.
Yeah, well, there's a picture of that one from that 1914 final with the Liverpool fans standing on the post. The idea of the stand, a grandstand, if you like, to go away and stand the ground wasn't really. I don't think had it. Aston Villa, I think, were the first to go down the route of an all-enclosed grandstand.
Yeah, as we would understand it in modern terms.
I do know it today. But it was more like an open field with a few stands scattered around, and then cram the people in as best they could.
The idea of standing on that post for 90 minutes watching the cup final, I'd take my hat off to those guys. But anyway, there we are. I mean, the next, I suppose, the easy iconic moments, I suppose, Phil, would be the 1923 cup final, the famous White Horse, wasn't it? Was it Bolton, West Ham?
Yeah.
I mean, various estimates on the crowd for that. I mean, Wembley was built with 100,000 capacity officially, and I mean, I've seen as guesses as high as 200,000 people in the stadium.
Yeah, I mean, it was a double whammy for them. It was an opening of the new stadium, triple whammy. They didn't think about ticketing. It wasn't an issue. Never thought about ticketing, and it was compacted by the fact it was a southern team had made the final in terms of West Ham.
West Ham.
So, there was a lot of locals who would go and see the game.
Yeah.
So it was fantastic from one side, but obviously a disaster from an organisation side. But it's memorable now, obviously, for being known as the White Horse Final, for the guy who was on that horse, who managed to manage the crowd. An interesting side story in there that the policeman who was on that horse was given a free ticket for every future FA Cup final, and never went to any. Yeah, he didn't like football.
I like that story. Was the horse called Billy? Or am I
Yeah,
making that
something
up?
like that.
Billy,
Billy, yeah, no,
Billy the
it
White
sounds
Horse.
right.
Maybe Billy could have gone.
Billy should have gone in his place. Yeah, I think so.
I mean, I suppose, as you say, I mean that's the level. I mean, if you think that 1923 final is what, just 50 years on from the very first Wanderers game, which had I think just a couple of thousand people at the Oval Cricket
Yeah, there
Ground,
was.
and
Yeah,
then you've got, let's say, 200,000. No one really
yeah,
knows. Let's go with it. That gives you a kind of a sense of the expansion of football. I mean, it was an explosion, wasn't it? Really, in this country, incredible
yeah, not just this
explosion
country, but
of
worldwide,
interest.
obviously. But yeah, it was, and with it being so close to post-war as well, when there'd been no football for a while during the First World War, it just was a catalyst for interest for everyone to get to watch football. So it was
Yeah,
the
a
biggest
desire
feature.
to enjoy yourself. Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree. I agree.
and
I suppose. Yeah, I mean, I suppose in a similar vein. I mean, I've picked out, and obviously the obvious ones here. I'm not going for anything you won't have. If you wanted originality, Phil, you've come on the wrong podcast, didn't mate? But Stanley Matthews Cup Final, 1953. I mean, that was. I mean, I always feel sorry for Stan Mortensen, who scored a hat trick, but no one ever talks about the Mortensen Cup Final. It's always Stanley
that's right.
Matthews, isn't it?
Yeah,
Um,
the only hat trick at a Wembley Cup final. So yeah, you'd think if you get a match ball, you'd certainly get the final named after you, but not the case. Yeah, I think Stanley
no,
Matthews was one of those players that was loved from across the country, not just for the team he played for. And people were willing him to win at the third attempt. Were willing him to win the cup final, and he played such a dominant part in the comeback to win the game. So that's what all the media focus was on. That just shows you how powerful the media can be in conveying what happened in a competition.
everything we've spoken about so far exists in the black and white world of pre-history, before I was born. The next game I've picked out is one I remember vividly, and I'm going to apologise to you as a Leeds fan. Apologise to you in advance, because it was the first cup final that I watched in colour television, Phil. We had first colour telly,
Yeah, very
and
good.
it was Sunderland beating Leeds in 1973. I mean, I think it's one of those games. I mean, I can't speak for you as a Leeds fan, but it exists out of time. It's just the story is bigger than the clubs, and it was just wonderful. I mean, the save from Jim Montgomery, from Peter Lorimer, close range. The imagery, I can still picture Bob Stokoe running with that odd beige mac that he had, and they had a hat on, and all sorts of weird things. And as we said at the start of the conversation, it was the classic cup final of the time, in the sense that you'd watched it's a knockout, people running around buckets of water. It's, as a 13-year-old at the time, I'll never forget it. It's a landmark moment in your life. I mean, a tough gig as a Leeds fan, I guess. To be part of it is something.
We had one of the year before, so it wasn't awful.
Yeah, they beat Arsenal, didn't they? Yeah.
Yeah, I would argue it's probably the biggest upset in an FA Cup final that there's ever been.
Well, it's going to be one of my questions. I mean, the big. I mean, I would think that one it tops Wimbledon in '88 for me, but
yeah, I mean, Wimbledon '88. Wimbledon was 6th or 7th in the top flight. So
yeah,
whilst on paper it said Wimbledon had, it was all based on where they'd come from. It was fantastic that they'd won, and everyone would see them as an underdog. But the stark reality of it was that they were a match for Liverpool throughout the season, so it wasn't that much of a shock. The only other one I think that's come close is Wigan beating Man City in 2013,
yes,
last minute goal when they got relegated. But even they were obviously the top flight club, so it's more to do with the fact that they were so low down the table when it happened. But I would say Sunderland winning against Leeds is probably the biggest upset in a cup final in its history. I'll definitely say that.
and it provides I mean, if you get any montage on TV of cup football, I mean, it's just one of those, along with Ronnie Radford scoring in.
Yeah.
And again, another that was all played out on Match of the Day. It wasn't live, and the cup final was live. But these images are iconic in the true sense, I think. I mean, as far as the future's concerned, I think I don't know if you'd agree. I think the cup still has its role. It's still there. It's still going. It's had a few rocky moments, but it's still in the game, isn't it?
Well, I think
You know,
you have to differentiate between the club owners and the clubs and their fans and their players for when you're thinking about the future of the FA Cup. Because obviously the club owners don't care for it because it
no,
gives no opportunity to generate any income. This is at the top end, although the managers see it as a good way of blooding players and getting them a chance to try things out in a game that they don't see matters that much either. But what I saw in when we had lockdown, quite interestingly, there seemed to be an upturn in the quality and choice of players that they used in FA Cup games, and actually saw it as a competition that it could use to try to do well in. And I think there's still a large number of people that are connected to top clubs that will want the club to still take the cup seriously. The challenge we have, obviously, is at the top end, clubs like Manchester City do take the cup seriously in a sense because they still play teams that are good enough to beat whatever opposition they face because they've got such depth in their squad.
yeah,
Man City, I have to say, have been one of the few exceptions that do take the FA Cup pretty seriously. But other clubs, they get by, they get through the early rounds because they've just got the strength and depth that they can play their second string team and still be far too good for
good enough.
the
Yeah,
others. Yeah, and that's why you see the top teams winning the FA Cup each year. So even though they're perceived not to take it seriously, they're still winning it. So that's the dichotomy I suppose of that. And the issue is, they don't make any money out of it. They're pittance as far as it's concerned. But I still believe that people in the club still want the club to do well. And you ask any of the players at Leicester, any of the fans at Leicester City after winning the FA Cup, which do they prefer, winning that FA Cup or winning the League Championship 4 or 5 years ago?
yeah.
Or which not prefer, but which one do they remember the best? And I would, having talked to a few, but I've obviously not talked to anywhere near the majority, but all the ones I talked to say that the FA Cup was a more special memory than winning the league.
It's glory, isn't it? It's the
glory
day.
of the day. It's a fantastic occasion. Obviously, they've got a monkey off their back because they had held the record for the most finals without winning it. And
Well, that was going to be one of my questions. You've answered one of my questions, Phil.
Well, they were.
I don't think it would be a particularly hard question, but
they had 4 previous finals, but and it was won by a fantastic goal. And again, ask the Wigan fans: would you take losing the final but maintaining your Premier League status over what happened? And they will say no. Winning the FA Cup, getting relegated wasn't an issue. Winning the FA Cup was such a fantastic day. As you started off, it's about the memories that it gives
absolutely
fans and the players. They'll say, no, we'll have that every time.
I'm going to ask you in a moment your favourite cup tie, but in blowing all the rules of interviewing out the walls, I'm going to tell you about my favourite cup tie first, because it's a podcast and we do what we want on a podcast. I mean, for any Millwall fan, I mean, it fits in, I think, entirely with everything we've said across the whole of this show. But from our point of view, I think the semi-final, when we got to the cup final, played at Cardiff in 2004, but the win over Sunderland in the semi-final, it's one of those exists in its own world in the collective memory of Millwall fans. Anyone that was there that day will never forget it. I think some measure of realism when you get to a final against Manchester United, you can't really go there expecting to have a realistic chance. But that win at Old Trafford, and to make the cup final, I don't know, it still carried resonance. We'd never been to a cup final, made the semi-final a good few times over our history, and there we made it. It will never leave me. I know that much as a fan of the game. So that's my favourite ever cup tie, Phil. But what's your favourite? Do you have one that you linger over?
Well, I have many, as you can imagine, and it's changed from my days of being a Leeds United fan, going to games, to now.
Yeah,
but I don't watch Leeds anywhere near as much, and we don't do very well in the cup anyway. So just going around the country to games. But my favourite Leeds United moment was in 1987. We were a second division team at the time, and we were drawn at home to play QPR, and it was on my birthday.
Okay.
And so it was a fantastic day to go and watch Leeds play QPR in the FA Cup, and for us to win.
Right.
So we were a low-level team against a top-flight team. So that, and being my birthday, it was like,
of course,
everything, and with it being the FA Cup, my favourite competition. So all the things, all the stars were aligned. Thankfully, got out without any injuries, because it was quite a notable game for a lot of crowd trouble and stuff. But that was
wow.
Leeds United.
We're children of the 1970s, Phil.
So it wasn't unusual, but it was just great, a fantastic memory. And the occasion, it's just the whole thing combined. It was brilliant, and I love it. And so I'll never, we've not we've only come close to being in the final once seriously in my adult lifetime. So that was that season. Actually, we got all the way to the semi-finals. But that definitely would be my favourite game that I ever went to.
Fantastic. I mean, it always fascinates, just as a side point, really, it always fascinates me. I mean, Leeds obviously now in the Premier League. I'm trying to find a kind word, maybe a middling kind of Premier League side at the moment. It always fascinates me why teams in that position don't take the cup much more seriously than they seem to. They seem to value survival in the Premier League more than the chance of winning something. I mean, and cup glory to me, you've got a trophy on your team photo at the start of next season.
This is the difference. This is the difference between the club owners and the clubs. That's why I'm always keen to separate them. For the club owner, every position that they get higher in the Premier League is worth more, or at least the same.
It's financial.
So it's in their interest, even if they're mid-table, it's better to finish 7th than 8th, because they get the financial benefit of doing so. So the FA Cup, the players want it, the fans definitely want it. So it's about that balance. And I think people talk about, why don't you give the FA Cup more money, or give it a Champions League spot? That'll make a difference. Well, it wouldn't. I don't think. I think actually what we need to do is say to the guys who win the FA Cup, there isn't really a lot of money to win this, as you know. So we're going to take that money away and give it to the game itself, and increase the rewards for other clubs of progressing in the competition, because to win that £6 million or whatever it is now, it's irrelevant to you as a top flight team. That money,
it's small change,
on the back of the sofa. So you're not winning it for that. You're winning it for the prestige of winning it, and that's something that I've been very strong to advocate, that clubs want to try and win the FA Cup just because of the prestige of the competition, and for what it does to generate joy for the fans. And I think that's important. And even Manchester City fans and other big club fans who've won the cup several times in recent times. I mean, Arsenal fans and Chelsea they've both had many finals and wins in the 21st century. But I'm sure every single final is still memorable to them.
Absolutely. I mean, I was really lucky. Just before Christmas, I sat on a table at a function with some Bury fans. Bury, famously, the biggest Cups final win, 6-0 in 1903. The name Bury they've had their troubles recently, but that's still Bury. That's they're a name. That's a proper name. That's what the Cup can do to you. It's wonderful to see. Them continuing on that tradition and keeping their name alive, and that's the magic of the FA Cup. As to borrow a cliche, just to repeat, listeners, you can get Phil's book, FA Cup 150. It's 150 years since the very first competition. The website is facupfactfile.co.uk. It's £15. And if you move fast during January, you're going to get free postage. I'm just looking at it. I might move fast after this conversation is over and get myself a copy. Phil, I really appreciate your time today, mate. I won't keep you any longer. Great to have you on the show. And do keep in touch and follow Phil on your Twitter handle. What was your Twitter handle, Phil?
So follow me on Twitter at FA Cup Factfile.
FA Cup Factfile. Thank you to Phil, and thank you for listening to the show, listeners, and we'll be back very, very soon with another edition of the Football History Podcast. Until then, bye for now.